Welcome to the Warren Cycling Podcast. My name is Dean Warren. I'm in Sydney, Australia today.
And I'm Randy Warren. I'm in Asheville, North Carolina.
And I'm Taylor Warren, and I'm in Murcia, Spain.
Wow, welcome, Taylor. We're super excited to have you on the podcast today. And it is episode 378 of the Warren Cycling Podcast, and we're in two different days today. It's the 24th of January here in Australia already. It's early in the morning. Taylor's in Spain, where it's in the evening, and the 23rd still. And same for Randy. It's an early afternoon for Randy in North Carolina. So we're spread across the whole world to cover what's going on around with cycling. But Taylor, you've had some teammates from CS Velo, which unfortunately is not existing team this year for the 2025 race season. But you guys got together, some of you, and we're riding around the area, what they call it, the Gold Coast of Spain, the area where a lot of the World Tour of professional cycling teams gather to train at this time of the year. And there was an article just in Velo News. Well, I don't know what you call it anymore. Velo's just a subsidiary of Outside now, right? So anyway, Velo
bicycling arm, yeah.
Yeah, the bicycle. Yeah. Well, anyway, they just were highlighting that area where you were riding. So we're gonna get firsthand knowledge from you. How is the riding there? Is it as good as they say it is, and there are really lots of teams training out there on the roads?
It was pretty phenomenal. So I've got actually 4 teammates in Spain right now. One is staying in my house currently, and then I've got 2 teammates up in Dinia, which is on, I think you said the Gold Coast, but it's actually the Costa Blanca.
Costa Blanca.
The White Coast, and then Costa Brava is up by Girona. So this area, Costa Blanca, is it's the stretch between Alicante and Valencia, and most of the pros are staying right around Denia or Calpe or outside of the Benidorm area. It's like kind of right in the middle between Alicante and Valencia on the east coast of Spain. They come here to train a lot in the winter because it's probably one of the warmest places in Europe at the moment. The roads are super nice. There's some good climbing, and it was pretty cold when we were up there in the 40s, low 50s. But it's usually in the 60s this time of year, and even in the 70s. So it's a really nice place to train for the weather, for the climbs, and I think just the atmosphere in general. I was getting pretty motivated to ride just by being there. I think we saw maybe 10 different men's World Tour teams and 5 or so women's World Tour teams. So we're seeing tons of pro riders out there. They got their follow cars behind them. A lot of the time they're doing lactate testing up these climbs. So getting ready for the season, doing performance testing out there. We saw a lot of Kopecky in her world champion jersey. That was super cool. And then besides the pros, there's probably we probably saw hundreds, if not thousands, of amateur cyclists, just bike riders everywhere. I think one of my teammates described it as it's like Zwift in real life. You're just constantly passing riders, being passed by riders. I did the Col de Rates, which is one of the main climbs up there they do testing on. And I think on Strava, that climb had been ridden, not been ridden, but the amount of people that were on the leaderboard was 85,000.
Oh,
yeah. So it's by far the biggest leaderboard for a climb I've ever seen. And I put in a pretty good effort that day. I think I averaged 320 watts at the climb, and I was 12,000th overall.
Tell me about the climb a little bit. Describe how I mean, what makes it, you think, a good climb for testing?
You need to say percentile too when you get to that part, because 12,000 doesn't sound that good, but if you're like 85th percentile or 90th percentile, then it sounds pretty good. So
I think it was top 16% or so. So it's decent, but I mean, I'm used to being top 50, top 10 when I go hard on a climb. So it's kind of humbling when you're getting beat by 12,000 other riders. But
which is also like Zwift too. All these guys that beat you that you don't know, how can these guys be so strong, right?
Right, and probably a lot of them don't even race, which is, I mean, it's different, right? And there's strong people everywhere. You don't have to race to be a strong bike rider. But the climb itself, the Col de Rates, there wasn't really anything special about it. It's a nice climb. It's got a nice twisty road, pretty close to the coast, so you can get good views of the ocean towards the top. I think it's probably maybe like 5.5, 6K at 5%. Pretty steady. Maybe a couple stretches where it flattened out, and a couple stretches it pitched up on the switchbacks. But yeah, I mean, as far as like the climb itself, I don't think there was anything special about it. I think it's more the location and the weather, and just it's what's available to use, and so that's where all the pros are going and doing their testing.
Yeah, I think for testing, I like having a steadier grade anyway. If you've got something that has steep pitches, it's not so bad. But if you have something that really slacks off, I have the hardest time there maintaining the power on those slacked off spots because you're so used to going hard in the steeper part. So if it can be a steady 5 to 6%, that seems like a good spot for testing too.
I think so, yeah. I think a consistent gradient where you're not having to think too much about pace changes and accelerating or getting in and out of the saddle a bunch. We did another climb called Ebo. That one was a little longer, and it seemed a little bit more steady of a gradient as well. And we actually saw more riders testing on that climb than the Col de Rates. The Rates is kind of short. Like I think the Pogacar's got the KOM, and I think it's like a 20. No, it's a 12 and a half minute effort or so. So it's not a very long climb. Yeah, for him. I think when I did my effort, I was 19 and a half minutes. So he went 7 minutes faster than me on a 5.5K climb.
What would be like the median time then, like for someone that's maybe halfway up the leaderboard, 42,000 on the leaderboard?
Maybe 22, 23 minutes or so, 25 minutes.
I thought it'd be a more bigger drop off than that. Yeah. So it just shows the quality of people doing that climb, right?
I mean, it's one of those climbs that you could probably find almost every World Tour rider has their time on that climb. So I think a lot of amateurs like to come down and just test themselves and see where they stack up against these pros.
It was interesting too. The articles talked about too how it's a great place for people to ride in the wintertime because it's a very popular place in the summertime, and that a lot of hotels are empty or even closed, and so it makes it really attractive for people to go there because it's probably not super expensive to stay. If it's a place that it's all booked up and you have to book years in advance, it's hard. But if people can be like, hey, let's go next week or in a month from now, let's reserve some rooms and head down, it makes it pretty easy for people to get there too.
For sure. I mean, I think that's the case in a lot of places in the winter. But yeah, here especially, it was kind of the town of Dinia. We were staying maybe 5K north of the town center, and where we were staying was kind of a ghost town. I think there's a lot of vacant buildings, a lot of maybe just condos or timeshare type situations where no one's living there in the winter, and then they might occupy that space during the summer months. But if you live somewhere in the interior of Spain, you almost have to get to the coast during the summer because you're going to be experiencing temperatures close to 40 degrees Celsius. Like I heard in Murcia down here, if it's 40 degrees every day, we heard that the town basically migrates to the coast for the whole month of August.
And how much cooler is it? And what do you gain?
It's probably maybe 5 degrees cooler, but then just access to the Mediterranean. I think you have a place to cool down, get in the water.
Sure.
How far away is it too from where? What kind of trip was it from where you're living to where you were this weekend?
It was a little over an hour and a half drive. It's probably 160 kilometers northeast of here. So the trip was really easy. It's pretty great that, I mean, the riding in Murcia it's decent. I wouldn't call it great riding, but to be that close to Dinia and Calpe and some of these places that get a huge number of World Tour riders training there and have some epic rides, it's pretty nice to be able to just make a day trip, essentially, get up there, do a ride. If I wanted to, I could probably go up there and back in a day and get a nice ride in. So to have the accessibility of that is pretty cool.
As amateur cyclists that are excited to be riding where the professionals are, did you see that they're pretty respectful though, that the professionals, that's their work, they're out there doing their job, that they're not trying to, get in the way or overwhelm them? Some are just being like fanning on them, but cycling's not that. I think it's because it's a sport where the majority of the fans maybe are cyclists themselves, that they don't maybe like attack. Attack's the right word, but they don't overwhelm like a professional, like maybe if it was a football, European football or some other sport where they're just big fans and they would It's just a whole different thing because you're out on an open road and you're out riding. And I know I remember following Peter Sagan's brother once at Lake Tahoe. I think, but I was just keeping my distance. I thought, it would be nice but I don't think he speaks English, so because Peter didn't speak, like just go say hi or something. But no, how is it there that you saw with the amateur cyclists?
I think for the most part, people are pretty respectful, but at the same time, we would see amateur riders just drafting off of the World Tour teams. It'd be like the World Tour team, they'd split up into a couple groups because it's probably pretty hard to ride together as a whole team. So maybe 10 or 12 riders in a group. And then sometimes you would see maybe 20 amateur riders drafting behind that group. So there's definitely a little bit of that where the amateurs are kind of getting in the way. I don't know if getting in the way is the right word, but definitely like interfering with the work to some degree. And then because these teams would have follow cars with them typically as well. So you'd have a bunch of amateurs like in between the team and the follow cars. But I mean, a lot of times the pros are probably going too fast for the amateurs to stay with them long, especially if they're doing a decent amount of climbing.
My guess too is that it's funny because I'm on a bunch of message boards and stuff too for cycling, and you see some people get so bent out of shape when someone's drafting off them, and it's like somehow that's killing them, by having someone draft off them. And but the pros are so used to this anyway that my guess is that if someone's on their wheel, as long as they aren't hampering what they're doing, as long as they aren't trying to break into the pace line or possibly trying to half wheel them or something like that too, they probably really don't care that much because it doesn't really bother them that mumuch too. And so it's not as big of a deal. It just shows that, because they're, like you said, they're doing their work. They're getting their training in. As long as they're able to do that, if people are on their wheel, it doesn't really matter too much unless they're interfering, like you said, with getting in the way of the team car coming up to them or things like that. But most of the time, it's not probably a big deal to them.
Right. I think, I've had that situation happen to me a lot too. And I like when people let me know they're there. They tell me, hey, I'm going to sit on your wheel. Yeah, that's fine. But if I don't like it when I look behind me and someone's just drafting off me, because that could be dangerous for me and them, right? I'm not going to be pointing out objects in the road. I'm not going to tell them when I'm turning. So just having that element of surprise isn't my favorite. But yeah, I don't really think it's too hindering if someone just says, hey, can I sit on your wheel here and just draft and kind of stay out the way.
Taylor, I think, did you tell me that you did a training ride with your team now? You've joined a local team there in Murcia where you had a follow car as well with your team?
Yes, we had a follow car on a training ride, and I actually just learned today that we have a caravan and a follow car and all the races I'll be doing. So that's pretty cool because usually you don't necessarily see that unless you're doing like a UCI level race. So to have a follow car and a team director and even radios in these amateur races is pretty cool and makes you feel like you're in a high level pro race.
And you've got your race season just about to begin there for your series. Can you describe what kind of series you have and what the racing you expect to be?
So I'm racing on Saturday. That's the first race of the year for me, and it's a 9-race series, and the series is for Masters 30 plus. That's the category I'll be racing this year. So it'll be a little bit of a transition from the category I'm used to racing, which is typically in the USA be Cat 1, Cat 2, elite level. The races are a little bit shorter. Most races are going to be right around 80 kilometers. And it seems like most of the races we do have some kind of component where you're doing smaller circuits within like a neighborhood or a part of town, and then you go out and do a bigger circuit. So I think they're maybe a little bit more fan friendly in that regard. But the race, I did a race in December here actually as well.
Because you have fans there watching, not just the relatives and the curious onlookers in the U.S.
Yeah, exactly. There's people out there watching you do the smaller laps, and then there's even a band playing. There's like a couple food trucks, so it's like more of a family event. A lot of people from the neighborhood come out and watch. And then I think we do 4 10-kilometer circuits, and then we go out and do one big 40K circuit, and then we come back into the same finish line that we were doing the circuits on. And the 4 circuits are pretty flat, and then the big circuit is kind of rolling. net uphill on the way out and net downhill on the way back. And it seems like it'll be somewhat technical as well, where the finish has a series of turns coming in and a few different roundabouts to navigate. So that'll be a challenge that I'm not necessarily used to as well, just all the different road furniture on European roads. So I'd imagine positioning will probably be pretty important to do well in that kind of race.
Do you know what field sizes they're going to be?
I think there'll probably be around 100 riders or so. So it'll be a decently big field.
Yeah. And how big is your team?
The team? Well, we have riders from all ages, so 30 plus, 40 plus, 50, I think all the way to, I don't think we have any 70 plus riders. I think we just have 30, 40, and 50 plus. There's maybe 5 or 6 of us in the 30 plus. And I think there's 18 total riders spread across those 3 categories.
We all race together and they'll break it up at the end, or will you have separate waves going?
I'm not quite sure. I think this series is only for 30 plus riders. There's no other categories. The race I did in December, we raced everyone at once. It was U23 elite riders and then all the masters categories together. And I think that field size is like 130 riders or so. But that was like a one-off race, not part of a series in the middle of winter. I think that race typically has a lower turnout. So I think this one will be masters 30 plus riders only and 100 or so riders from that category.
Does your team have, do you think you know your teammates and what your strengths and weaknesses are and who you might support during the race, or are you just kind of playing it by ear for this one?
I know a little bit, probably a lot of it will be playing it by ear. I'm probably one of the faster finishers on the team, and this race is most likely going to come down to a sprint. So I'd imagine I'll be in the hunt for doing well in the finish line. The rider that owns and runs the team, his name's Teo. The team's called Cyclos Teo, named after his bike shop. He's a really strong rider. He was a junior national champion on the track here in Spain. He's a similar rider to someone like Alejandro Valverde, I'd say. He's also from Murcia, but he's a small rider that has a pretty good punch. So he can climb well and sprint pretty well. And he actually won the overall series last year. He won this first race too. So I'll probably be working for him. I'll probably be trying to lead him out, set him up for the finish. And then we have one other rider who's been riding really strong, but I think the 3 of us will probably be the main factors for the finish. And then maybe some of the other riders will be on early break duty or helping patrol the peloton a little bit and keep breaks in check or so.
So if a rider gets off and wins like solo, are you and Teo going to be sprinting like on opposite sides and bike throwing like UAE did at the stage 3 of the Santos Tour down under?
I hope not. I hope we can coordinate pretty well. There's a little bit of a language barrier, so it's difficult. The race I did in December, Teo and I finished 4th and 5th. We were second and third in the Masters 30 plus category, but I think that's always a bad look when you're finishing right next to your teammate, because it means that had one of us committed to the other rider, we probably would have put one of us on the podium or even won the race.
Is this part of, is it like considered a UCI division of a race, or is there a National Cycling Federation for Spain, or is it just independently organized, or how is it? Because I know like in Italy, it's like either UCI, top level U23 elite, or everything else. There's a clear division. Where in the United States, you'll have Cat 5s also racing in USAC races, and not that many road races that aren't sanctioned.
This race and most of the races that I'm familiar with, they're run by the Spanish National Federation. So this year, instead of buying a USAC license, I have a Spanish license now. And so I think I'm not sure. I don't even think they have categorized races here. I think it's all based on age. There's junior, U23, elite, and masters essentially. And that's the only categories they have. They don't have Cat 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, I mean, if you're Cat 4 level, maybe these races aren't for you and you're doing like a Grand Fondo or something like that. They're still could be pretty competitive, but not necessarily like a flat out race all the time.
Are there a lot of opportunities to do races and or like the Fondos?
Like for the races, I haven't really looked into the Fondos too much. I'm sure there are a lot of opportunities for that. But this race season I'm doing coming up, we have 9 race days from now until the first week of April. So this series is basically 1 race per weekend or so. And this is all just in the Murcia region too. So if you look on the Spanish Federation website, you can see races from regions from all over. I think the farthest race I'll have to travel to is maybe an hour drive, 45-minute drive. But the race I'm doing Saturday, it's a 13K away from where I live.
You could ride there.
Yeah, I'm planning on riding there and back.
Yeah.
So do you have race wheels? No, you don't have race wheels anymore. It used to be we always had to bring race wheels, and so sometimes if they rode to the race, you'd strap on your race wheels onto your backpacks like that. I remember a British official one time told me that in Great Britain back in the day, they would have almost everybody would ride their bikes to the start of the race with their race wheels strapped to the back of their backpack. They just leave everything into a spot by the start line, put the race wheels on, go race, come back, put the race wheels back off, change maybe, and then head back home. Probably not quite like that, but not too dissimilar either.
I only have race wheels, so, and it's kind of been like that since disc brakes for me. Really, yeah. I think not having to change the brake pads in and out have made it a little easier. But I was actually just telling my teammate Alan that I want a pair of training wheels because keeping your race tires fresh and ready to race on is pretty nice. Just because typically they're a lot thinner of a tire and you might run through them a lot quicker. Whereas if I had a training set, I could put on some really heavy duty tires, maybe even something with a light tread on it and do some gravel riding, just open up the options for routes a little bit better and hopefully prevent punctures, and then have a set of wheels that I'm only racing on that basically have brand new tires on them when I put them on for race day.
Yeah, and you're running tubeless too, probably, right? So it's not so easy to stop up. Yeah. So I'm still running. Yeah. So I actually have race tires, but I'm running tubes, so I swap out my tires before races. So yeah, I mean it is help. I'm thinking the same thing. Getting a pair of race wheels and training wheels, even for this kind of thing, makes a difference because like back in the day when you had the race wheels specifically, you knew they're always true. We don't have to worry about that as much these days, but you knew the tires were always in good shape. You just knew that you just put them on and it'd be fine. Where now you have to like really inspect your tire, make sure there are any cuts in there or any things that might go bad during the race, and you flat less often, but still if you do, then that's not a good thing.
Right. Yeah, I just got my bike back from the shop actually for a little pre-race tune-up. The sealant in my tires were totally dry.
Yeah.
Got some new sealant, put a new chain on, cleaned the bike up a little bit, so it's all race ready.
That's Teo's shop. Your teammates.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was able to get a bike from the shop as well when I visited Taylor in November to go for a ride, so it's pretty cool. So Taylor,
it's like a really small, narrow Dutch shop, or is it like a truck store like here in the US, or something in between? I'm guessing.
Somewhere in between. They have a pretty decent amount of inventory. Yeah, pretty average size, I'd say. Like a neighborhood shop, more or less, than a truck shop.
Did we see in the United States that comparable to a neighborhood shop here?
I'd say so.
I think so too. Yeah.
And Teo is super nice. He was one of the first people I met over here. He's been really helping me out. He actually, I came to the bike shop today to pick up my bike and ended up going out to breakfast and getting coffee with him. So super friendly. It's been really good being like welcomed in this team, and even just given the opportunity to like take part in this series I'm doing with them as a foreign rider that can hardly communicate.
Yeah. Is that pretty unusual that they have somebody who's not from Spain racing on these teams and racing these races? Will you be like, oh, that's the American, because not many people have there?
I think maybe if you were in a different region, if you were in Andalusia or Valenciana, it might be more common, but in Motocicleta, it's probably super uncommon for a foreigner to race on the team, especially an American.
Yeah.
So you will be the American then.
Yeah.
So besides training though, you were riding around in the area of close to Benidorm, right, for the World Cup cyclocross race that took place over the weekend. Last weekend, you got to see that too, did you?
Yes. So Dinia is 50K north of Benidorm. So we rode the Col de Rottes that morning, ate some food, jumped in the car, drove down to Benidorm, got lost walking from the car to the venue. Got there a couple minutes after the women's start. Got to see the women race. We saw Tim Benapple take the win, and then got some food, chatted with some of the American riders, and then we got to watch the men's race. And that was a really fun dynamic race too, especially with Wout being there, and then seeing Wout not be able to win was pretty cool too, because it kind of made it a different dynamic than what we're used to seeing. But the other aspect was just how many people were there and how packed the venue was. Because I mean, I've certainly been to a lot of cross races in the U.S. and crit races, and this was like being at Crappy Hill or on one of the climbs and the tour, whereas the barriers are just packed with people trying to look at the riders, and there's so much noise and people with uh, bells and chainsaws with the chain on them, and there's a DJ and there's like food everywhere. It's just, the atmosphere is crazy. So it was a really cool event to be a part of and witness.
That's pretty cool to have it in Spain and have that much popularity, because I think you could probably just turn it up a few notches for those races taking place in Belgium or even the Netherlands. But I wonder if it was similar like that in Dublin or anywhere else where they've had the World Cups outside of Belgium and Holland, where it's the most popular races going on right now.
I think Dublin has been pretty impacted by it. That, there's a lot of cycling fans there too, and they've really rallied to that too. And I think the ones in the Czech Republic too, and there's the places where it's popular. I think and that's where the World Cup's going to be. Probably the least popular one is the one they used to hold in Italy in the snow. So that's probably the smallest World Cup crowd.
What did you see? They wanted to hold a World Cup in Sardinia this year, and they actually had to cancel it because of storms. But I think that's a new venue, right?
Yep, new venue, and actually too, it was a debatable, because some people were like, we don't want to invest the time and money to go down to do it, and so some teams said we're not going to go anyway, and then some teams said we're doing it because we want to get the World Cup points and everything too. So they were already there when they canceled it. So the ones that didn't go were like, good thing we didn't plan on going. But the ones that were already there were like, we wasted all this money and time coming down here. So it was a risk. It'll be interesting to see if they do it again or not. But yeah, that was definitely going to be. I mean, Sardinia has a long history of having high-level races there, but also a lot of amateur racing. I mean, we're going to be there racing this year for the Giro Sardinia amateur race too. But there's also a world championship gravel qualifier that's the first day of the road racing that we're doing too. So they're always kind of in the mix, but because they're a little more isolated, harder to get to, you're not going to get the same kind of frequency racing or numbers of people as you do in the areas like Belgium or France or Netherlands or things like that.
Right. It would have been interesting to see the fan turnout at a race like that, where it's a little bit less accessible to get to.
Yeah, I'm always surprised how many people come from the mainland though to Sardinia. It seems like it's a pretty long boat trip, but yet a lot of people do it too. So my guess is the turnout, especially because it would be a novelty, would be pretty darn good, but probably not quite the same as where you can't move around. I know, Dean, you said before when you've taken pictures at the World Cups in Belgium that once you got your spot in your photo booth over too, that was it. You couldn't even move because it would be impossible to get back out and back in someplace else.
Yeah, well, that was Cox's idea for the World Championship race.
Okay.
So it was over 60,000 people. That was probably one of the more crowded ones. Taylor, Randy, you just mentioned something about gravel and made me kind of question what the gravel scene might be like in Spain now, Taylor, because you mentioned like getting different tires and training wheels that you could go off road and do some gravel riding. Is that something that's starting to grow or get more popular that you've noticed since you've been there?
I would say so. It's hard to say down here. I don't think it's gotten quite as popular in Murcia. I know in Girona it's super popular. It's really blowing up. It's like kind of where the U.S. was maybe 5 or so years ago, where there's a lot of different races you can participate in, a lot of different distances. They have the Traca 360, which is a 360-kilometer long race up there. I think the big thing in Europe right now is the Gravel Earth Series. So it's kind of like the international version of the Lifetime Grand Prix that we have in the U.S. But I think I'd say, yeah, gravel here is maybe not quite as big in the U.S. yet, but it's probably going to be pretty soon.
And it's different. I was just saying it's different there too, because I noticed at least when I've done some more international events, and the gravel there they do is more it's more road friendly. So there's a lot more road dirt paved sections, and then the gravel is not is technical maybe is here. Or the World Championship went to Pemba de the most technical parts were the descents. So the super steep, 15, 16, 20% grade going downhill, where you had lots of twists and turns and stuff too, and less gravel technical.
Right. I mean, I think it just depends on the promoter and where you're racing, because it's like that in the U.S. too, where you might do a race like mid south, where if it's dry, it's actually not very technical. And then there's other races like Rock Cobbler out in California, where there's hike-a-bike sections, and you're probably better off on a mountain bike racing that. So I think it's kind of this place where the promoter has to decide what they want the level of technicality to be, and how that's going to impact the race, and how that's going to change how racers approach the race. I think the Spain gravel is probably a little bit more technical than what you were witnessing at like the World Championships, for instance. Where I mean, like the Traca 360 is mostly off road, I'd say, with terrain and surface similar to what you find in SoCal, maybe. I think it kind of just depends on the region and what the promoter wants to get out of the race as well.
Taylor, you mentioned about the riding in Girona, like that's grown already with gravel, but the road riding there, I've been able to rent a bike ride around there. That's where so many English-speaking professional cyclists have taken residence. Are you planning a trip sometime to check out that area? Or, I mean, it's kind of pretty far for you to get there, but is that kind of like on a bucket list riding area for you, or have any of your teammates that are there visiting talked about wanting to ride in that area as well?
I think eventually I want to get up there. It's pretty close to Barcelona, and I'll probably spend some time in Barcelona at some point, where I think I could make a trip up to Girona from there. I don't know if I'll necessarily bring a bike to ride, maybe if I can with the travel, but I actually have a decent amount of friends up in Girona. So it'd be nice just to go up there just to see some familiar faces and explore that area, and kind of like Denia, where it's just the atmosphere of being in like a cycling city, so to say. I think it'd be a pretty cool experience just to check it out.
Yeah, for sure.
Get a good dose of English language too from cyclists there too. My understanding is that there's huge sections of Girona that English is maybe the most common language spoken to.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, well, let's be respectful of what time frame we got going, and catch up a little bit what's going on, because here it's kind of funny. I'm in Australia just yesterday and today, where I could have watched the race live without staying up in the middle of the night. What time does it come on for you, Taylor? Is that in the middle of the night too, the racing? Anyway, but I was out riding myself, so I had to watch the replay and the highlights.
It's a lot. It ends here around midnight, so it probably ends around 6 in the morning for you, Taylor. So
yeah, I was gonna say, I think I just saw, because I just watched the finish of stage 3, not the live, but the replay, and I saw they were counting down when the live footage for stage 4 was going to go up, and I think it was 6 hours from now. So yeah, they'll start that race about 1 a.m. my time or so.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even for me, it's a little tough. And so this is one of those situations that if you lived in California, it'd be a little bit easier, because usually I'll go to bed these days before midnight, but I'm staying up to watch the end of the race the last couple of days, and then last week too with the women's race too.
Yeah, well, the women's race is 3 stages, and we had long breakaway in the first stage. Then their decisive stage, the one that settled the GC, had EF Oatley I'm missing part of their team name. EF Ole's Naomi Rugg, the Swiss rider, took that nice win and held on then for the overall. But Chloe Dygert, she was very active in all the stages, right? And then it kind of finally paid off for stage 3 for her.
Yeah, she was being active, but the first day she was being active was not for herself, too. She was just doing a lot of work. She's apparently in really good shape. So she was towing the field around a lot and then, getting away a little bit towards the end, chasing and stuff like that too. But then the last stage, right, yeah, it looked like it was going to be an opportunity. It was a really hard sprint, slightly uphill after a reduced bunch formed at the end. And yeah, she took off with, I think, more than 500 meters to go. And it actually put a second or two gap on the field in that time.
All right, the picture behind me, that her celebration was just a one-handed. Did she do any more than that? Is that she's just pretty low key with the celebration?
She was very, very subdued, right? Yeah, no huge celebration. I think for her at this point, she's like thinking, gotta win, that's good. Not like, yeah, I gotta win. So when you've won so many, world championship and Olympic medals and all that kind of stuff too. I mean, I think her mind's already on more of the season, so she almost expects to get success in this early event, but it's not really satisfying. It's more like just check a box off.
What do you think, Taylor? I think every win should be like celebrated more than that, because you never know when your next win's going to come, right?
I'd say so, but I think it depends a lot on your personality too. And what I've seen from Chloe Dygert is she's pretty introverted and reserved, so she might reflect that in her celebration as well. Where like Randy said, yeah, it's like she expects to get a stage win here, but she's not going to be happy until she wins the world championship time trial or an event with more prestige.
It was interesting too, because I heard Kristen Faulkner talking about her Olympic win recently on another podcast, and she was saying that she knew she won. People keep asking her, "Do you know you won?" Because when you crossed the line, it didn't look like you knew you were gonna win. And she said, I was not gonna have anybody beat me with a bike throw at the end. She said it happened too often. And then she goes, as soon as I crossed that line, I was thinking about the team pursuit 2 days from then. And then she goes, well, after she turned around and then she got off the bike, people, she realized, oh yeah, I need to enjoy this moment for a minute. And then she could maybe more celebrate too. So even at that biggest race, that kind of win too, it is like Taylor said, it's kind of your personality, what your, the way you are and stuff too. And I feel a little bad for her maybe that she didn't enjoy it more, but she didn't feel bad about it. She's like perfectly fine with the way it was.
Well, I think yesterday's win, the surprise win in the Tour Down Under, Romo from Movistar, I think he was pretty excited about his win, his first professional win. He's 26 years old, been 5 years racing. So depending on what kind of rider you are, what level you are, I mean, some racers go dozen years in the World Tour and don't win ever. So it was pretty special. It was nice to see. I mean, Sam Welsford's been taking all the sprints and all the races, which isn't too unusual, but it's nice to see always like cycling, because there's always surprises, right?
Yeah, that race too. I mean, yesterday, so it's like that could be decisive in this race. So you never know. The second last stage of Wollonga will be the one that really decides everything too. But this race, I forget who it was. They said that 2 or 3 years ago they did a climb very similar to this in a decisive stage 3, and there was only 3 people at the end. I think it was Jay Vine maybe was saying that. In that group, and there was 22 people this time or something. So it's like the number of people at that level of fitness is pretty high right now. So you get a few seconds like this, and that could be the race. Because the level is so close. As long as he can hang in there and not get a gap too much on Wollonga, that we might have saw the winning stage yesterday be the winner overall too.
Yeah, I think you're seeing better and better performances of the Tour Down Under these days, because the point system for team relegation is so important that I think a lot of riders would maybe send their B squad, or primarily just Australians, right, that are going good that time of year. But now it's like you're seeing pretty high level performances even in January, just because basically every point counts.
Yeah, it's huge. This is the relegation
year. Right? So, yeah.
It's interesting too. The Tour Down Under, the white jersey, best young rider, is a U22, I think, competition, because Magnus Sheffield is 22 years old and he isn't qualified for it. So I think it must be 21 years or younger for that youth qualification there. And the guy who's in it too, Albert Philipson, he's
He's only 18.
Yeah, 18 years old.
Yeah.
So
he's a big talent. Yeah, this is a big first big ride for him. But there's I think I was.
I read him, but what he was saying too, that he's learning as he's going. So he's like trying to figure stuff out as he's racing these races, because he doesn't really understand. He's never done a World Tour race before. He doesn't really understand the differences yet, how it works and stuff too. So his team's kind of like saying, hey, this is this. And the first time up the hill yesterday, he wasn't very well positioned, but then the second time he learned already, about positioning better and was better positioned for the final climb and stuff too. So he's obviously somebody who's intellectually attacking this race in a way that he's getting better even during the races.
Yeah, one to watch for the future for sure.
Yeah. I think there's several teenagers now in the World Tour where it used to be just maybe one or two that would make the jump, but more and more now are getting signed right from going from junior to the World Tour, which we'll find out in the years to come how that works out as far as how long their careers last or how the transition works out for them.
Well, you think too, because if it's U22 or whatever it is, for this race, how many guys are going to be U22 at a race like this? 16. There's 16 people that are 21 years or younger in this race, so it's a pretty big group. Just to your point, so
that's more than I would have thought.
Yeah.
And the Tour de France is U25 for the best young rider, right? Up to 25.
Yeah.
Or under
Yep.
25. Yeah. Yeah, because Tadej Pogačar just last year was like the first year he wasn't able to get the
first
best
year
young
on
rider.
Yeah. And they talk about that too, like maybe it's unfair. So maybe some people say after you've won the white jersey, you shouldn't be able to win it again or something like that. But they haven't talked about necessarily lowering it at a race like that, because 3-week Grand Tour, you're gonna have a far fewer people that are younger racing that than maybe like this race here.
Hey, did you see the GCN weekly show? Talking about maybe adding the Champs-Élysées stage the last day in Paris, that climb that they had at the Olympics. Well, that would be crazy. Like, where would they put it? Like, I don't know.
It won't happen.
If I was a rider, I would hate that idea.
Yeah, I read a pretty long article about that a couple months ago, and they said that logistically it can't happen. It just can't, because the Champs-Élysées is one thing, closing it down, but if you do Montmartre, the way you have to go through the city to close it down, it has to be a level even above the Tour de France, like the Olympics, to be able to do that kind of thing. So I guess I shouldn't say never, but it seems highly, highly unlikely based upon, because they were talking to city officials and what they'd have to do logistically to do that, and they said that unless it's the Olympics, this article is saying. It's a dream though. People keep talking about it because it would be a huge difference at that stage.
It would not be a ceremonial stage anymore, then, would it? Because it could be decisive, right?
Yeah.
For
sure.
They've done time trials in the Champs-Élysées too.
Yep.
But if I was a rider and I had to race that last day, instead of like enjoying the day, enjoying the accomplishment of all the miles you just raced and whatever position you're in, and just soaking up the atmosphere, and then you get to bump elbows and fight that last day, I think I wouldn't enjoy that very much.
Too much. It's already rough enough to go up and down the Champs-Élysées because it's pretty bumpy, and I mean
they're still going fast.
Yeah.
They may be ceremonial for the first part, but the last part they're definitely racing hard.
Yeah. Well, I guess maybe just in a few days or not too long from now, they'll have the invites for the wildcard teams, and just saw that like Tudor and Q36.5 got into the Flèche and Les, right? Those races. So those
it was interesting too, because I saw that Q36.5 or whatever was still in the hunt for the wild card, or before they professed that they had conceded not getting in this year. So I'm interested to see, maybe was that a bluff on their side, or why were they saying we're not going to get in, and then more things coming out, then they might get in. So, but yeah, hopefully it'll be decided.
Maybe that was before they signed Pidcock on and got a lot of publicity. And
Pidcock
absorb his points if he comes onto the team.
I forget how it works now. I think you bring half your points with you. I think that's how it is now. It would change a lot. It was you brought all your points, and they said, well, that's not fair. Then you brought none of your points, and then so I think they've settled on maybe half the points or something like that. So it's a weird system, obviously. Yeah. I think this is after Peacock, though, didn't make it, or it was on the team. He said he was not going to race the Tour no matter what, and his team said that's fine. We're not going to get in anyway.
Yeah, I wonder if we should have a podcast sometime, just because it's a promotion or demotion year, points focus year, just figuring out how it all works, because it's not so cut and dry. Not that it changes every 3 years, and what teams are, in the danger zone of going down and losing the World Tour license. And yeah, it's kind
Well,
of.
Taylor said too that people are going to bring in higher level riders to Tour Down Under to get more points, but sometimes you get more points by going to smaller races than you do at bigger races, because those are going to be absorbed by bigger teams and stuff too. So it's the strategy behind it is going to be different for different teams based upon where you are. Like Ineos just signed with, or Caleb Ewan just signed with Ineos. They can afford that and not necessarily count on him having to get wins in order to get them the points they need to stay, because they're going to stay no matter what. But if it was another team that was a lower level team signing him, the pressure would be immense, because if they say the only reason why they're signing him is they need the points to stay in the World Tour. So it's a lot of dynamics that we don't get to see on a regular basis.
It seems like from the riders they've signed, Q35 and Tudor are both trying to make the jump up into the World Tour.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. But that means other teams have to get down.
Yeah.
So yeah,
so
it's a battle.
Israel Premier Tech is one team, right, trying to get back up, and they've got a lot of points, right? They did really well last year.
Israel Premier Tech and Lotto are the top 2 non-World Tour teams right now, so they get the automatic invites to the Grand Tours this year.
So those two get the automatic invite, and then they have 2 more wildcard teams. Is that how it is?
Yeah, I think it's 2 more. Yeah, because there's 4 total wildcard teams, and they're actually talking about maybe reformulating that too. But yeah, it's always a mix, because they want to invite teams from the national tours, so Italy for the Giro and etc. But it's being limited now by UCI saying you have to have these other 2 teams that aren't World Tour teams in there. So yeah, it's an ongoing. I think we could do a show about it. Just what's happening.
That's what I mean. And X, we have to mention X as well, because they're. Yeah. All right.
And they've been getting the Wild Tour invitations too, so they've had the last 3 years, I think, right? So yeah, it's confusing for everybody, and to the point that some teams have been criticized for not even knowing themselves how best to work the system, because when they get to close to relegation and they're not doing well and they're scrambling for points at the end, people are saying, why didn't they send someone to this rider? Why didn't they send something to this race? Because they could have gotten easy points those races, and so the teams themselves were like, I wasn't really sure that wasn't our plan. How do they do it? They plan their season to survive in the World Tour, or they plan their season just to get individual exposure in some races that maybe not as important for World Tour points, but their sponsors get exposure that way. It's confusing.
Right, and there's a lot of moving pieces. Sometimes the sponsors might not even necessarily even care if your team is World Tour, as long as you're getting the publicity and you're getting wins and you're keeping the sponsors happy, more or less.
Yeah.
Sometimes some sponsors expensive, right?
Some sponsors only want the tour. Like, that's everything for them. If they're not in the tour, then they don't want to sponsor it. But other ones, like you said, yeah, if you're doing well in Italy or something like that, that might be what they really care about.
All right. Well, did we cover about everything? We didn't do birthdays yet. We'd like to look whose birthday. But
I did want to mention. So I saw a thing just today that Canada has banned time trial bikes for juniors.
Yeah, that was on the GCN show too for the national championship. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's a great idea.
Yeah.
I think that every non-UCI race should ban time trial bikes.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not opposed to that either. So I'll be doing the Giro Sardinia again, and they have a time trial for the first stage. And so last time I did it 2 years ago, I actually got a time trial bike to ride, and I won my age group in the time trial, by quite a bit. So I probably would have won maybe without it, but it was an advantage to have it for sure. And so I wish they just said no. No one could ride time trial bikes, because then I wouldn't have to worry about trying to get one just for that. And it's easier a lot of times just to race that way. And then for collegiate, so Taylor, the whole time you race collegiate, their time trial bikes weren't allowed, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, we only raced team time trials, but yeah, time trial bikes were not allowed. Race it Merc style. I think maybe there are rules about the aero equipment. I think you could have a TT helmet, wheels up to 60 millimeters in depth, and you could race a time trial frame, but you couldn't have aero bars or a disc or a lot of the traditional aspects of a time trial bike. And yeah, I mean, that's been a subject that needs to be it needs to be addressed probably the last few years or so, just because these time trial bikes and equipment is getting so ridiculously expensive, and you can definitely buy a lot of your speed in a time trial. And I understand that cycling is an equipment driven sport, and a lot of people really enjoy that aspect of the sport too, right? Having the fastest gear, having the nicest tech. But at a certain point, I think there needs to be a line drawn where maybe you have certain races are designated where you can use whatever you want. Maybe you can just use whatever position you want even. But then other races, especially amateur races where riders are maybe trying to get upgrade points or something along those lines, I think the equipment should be limited to some degree.
Yeah, I mean it is expensive no matter what, but you're making it more expensive, when you have more things that help. Like I said, you can get quite a significant advantage if you have just a standard bike, and if you have a totally tricked out time trial rig. I think for Canada they said you have to have the frame you race you have to race it for other races too. So it has to be, you couldn't, if it was a time trial frame, that's fine, you could race it, but you have to race that in road race too.
Right.
So
yeah.
And I think I mentioned this before during the podcast, but I had one of my riders at Cal Poly had a Klein bike that had horizontal dropouts, and it was made to be a mountain bike, but he also used it for road racing, and he also used it for track racing. So his one bike he used for all those things, and in the time and the track he actually used it for the pursuit. So that's right, that's great. You can do that for every bike. So people say it can't be done. Sometimes so Steve Hollendick, ask him. You can do it if you need to, right? So I mean, people want to race bikes, so they're going to conform to whatever the rules are. If it's can have better equipment, you can buy your way in. Yes, if you can't, they'll conform to that too.
Yeah, but it's a good idea to take away some cost prohibition that might be for people who want to get into it. So on the junior level, definitely thumbs up.
Yeah.
I agree. That's a good move by Canada.
We also mentioned too, just this weekend of the World Cup for cyclocross, and then the next weekend is World Championships. So it's coming up really quickly for sure for the peak of the season for sure. And there are quite a few Americans. How many did you see, Taylor, at the World Cup race in Spain, which was an unusual event because it was dry and it was pack racing too, which doesn't happen as much on a lot of the courses that are more technical because of mud and rain and stuff like that too. But there was probably 5 or 6 guys racing, I think, right?
And there was E23, so we had some Americans in E23 race, and then probably 4 or 5 in the women's and 4 or 5 in the men's, I'd say. Eric Bruner was there, Curtis White, Andrew Strohmeyer, the current national champion. I think it was just those 3 riders for the league, for the race.
Yeah, I think overall I've seen 5 or 6 racing total, but they made up the Spanish trip is the furthest they have to go now, I think, for the World Cup. So and it's a different style again too. So it was when I flipped on watching with 3 laps to go, there was probably 15 guys in the lead group still. It was a big pack.
Well, that's basically how Well lost is. The riders made him do a lot of the work, and then there was a counterattack after he had just done a lot of work to pull back 2 guys off the front, and everyone looked at him to pull back the counterattack, and it seemed like he was actually just tired, not able to, but that hesitation allowed Thibaut Nice to ride away for the win. So yeah, the racing was really cool with that group racing dynamic. I think going back to your earlier point too, a lot of times the Americans will skip Benidorm, whether it's timing in relation to Worlds or for whatever reason, but that one's typically not well attended, especially from the Americans.
But even not well attended, there were some there, which is great to see. So I know that they're working hard because again, there's few opportunities for road racing, obviously in America, for European style road racing, and for cross too. I mean, there's some, but not as much too. So the Mud Fund, I know for USA Cycling, supports a lot of the developing riders to be able to have a chance to experience racing over there, and their base is in Netherlands too. So there are people getting the opportunity for that too. But yeah, it just adds expense and time to be able to go to further away like that.
All right.
Well, let's do our birthday list. If you don't have anything else right now, we're just real thankful that Taylor, you can join us today and give us some insight from Ryan from Spain, and hope everything's going well with your source endurance coaching from over there that you're athletes are all maybe happy to get a chance to watch this podcast. We have to let them know that you're talking to us. So
sounds good. Yeah, let me know when it's all edited, and I'll push it out.
All right. Well, our birthday list today is from which day then? Whatever it is in Europe still, right?
Yeah, we're still the 23rd. Yep.
23rd Pro Cycling Stats, where we get a lot of our information. That I don't know what you do without Pro Cycling Stats, so you can find everything there. So it's pretty cool. But they mark out the list according to their point system, which isn't quite the same as UCI, but a lot of people will refer to the Pro Cycling Stats points, right?
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yep.
So today, turning 56, Stefano Zanini, Italian racer. 56. Wow, it just shows we're getting older. I'm thinking, wow, it seems like he wasn't racing that long ago, but I guess it has been a while.
2007, yeah, last year.
Yeah.
So, but he's a total big time racer. Won Amstel Gold, stages in the Giro d'Italia and the Tour de France. So he's Trent Yardico. He's won a lot. He was a big racer, and he raced for Mapei during their heyday, and then Quick Step, Liquidas, and Lotto at the end. So, yeah, big time racer for sure.
Yeah, Jörg Müller second. He's 64, a Swiss rider.
Oh yeah,
Müller, yeah, won the overall Tour de Romandie. A couple of stages of the Volta Catalonia, stage of the Tour de Suisse. So he's 64, but the first active rider celebrating his birthday today we have is Merhawi Kudus. Merhawi Kudus, the Eritrean rider.
Eritrean, yeah.
So he raced a couple of years for EF Education, Easy Post, but now he's riding for Burgos. So
he signed through 2026 too. He signed for the next couple of years, so
yeah,
he's obviously he's 31, still have some time. And he won the GC in the Tour of Rwanda, in 19. So it's a ways, well, but it's not quite as big a race then as it is now, but still, it's a significant race.
Right. That's coming up, I think, in February. So yeah, a lot of eyes maybe on Rwanda because of the World Championships there this year.
And how hard the World Championships are going to be too. And so Gervais has already said that he's probably not going to do it because it's too hard for him to do the race. He said he might if they really want him to go, and they say he has to go, then he'll go. Eritrea is saying he'll go, but he said I'm not going to be competitive. It's just too hard of a course. It's going to be one of the highest climbing courses in the history of the World Championships, I think. At a high elevation too, isn't it? A high elevation too, so it'd be a hard race.
Yeah, it's gonna be difficult. It's gonna be tons of people everywhere too. It's gonna be crazy. So Michael Olheiser, American on the list, celebrating his 50th birthday.
Oh man, Olheiser too. I wish that he's one of my Facebook friends too, and he races in this area. I think he's from Tennessee, but he turned pro in his mid 30s, I think. So, but he had always been a top racer regionally and nationally for many years. He's a strong guy.
All right. Well, that's all I see for Americans. That's unusual. Usually we get a couple other ones, but yeah. Thanks, Taylor. Appreciate you taking the time. Time for you to get some dinner. That's dinner served late in Spain, right? So you're right in the culture there. You had dinner around 9, 10 o'clock at night.
If I can avoid it, a little earlier than that, but yeah, right around 8 is typically normal these days.
All right, Randy, you're gonna go out for a cold ride?
I am, yeah. I've been riding too much inside lately. I've been doing a lot of inside riding. I've been teaching classes twice a week, and then and Nationals I did pre-ride a lap of the Nationals course on Tuesday though too. So I got
Esports Nationals.
Yeah, So the race Nationals is a week from Saturday. So I've ridden 2 laps of that course now for pre-riding, and I'll be on several more times between now and then too. So I don't feel like it's gonna be 35 degrees. So which in Chicago would be a really nice day if I lived there.
Fahrenheit schedule.
Yeah.
Well, I'm gonna go for a hike. I did a ride yesterday, and I was they marked out some nice ways to get through Sydney on bikes, but man, they take you on pretty much glorified sidewalk trails, turn you along a bunch of side streets, but it's well signposted and marked all on the street, so you can follow it. But and then I was getting north of town, but then finally I got to the national park that's just north here, Ku Ring Gai Chase National Park, and it was beautiful there. It was wonderful. No, hardly any cars, lots of climbs. I was on a mountain bike, so it wasn't that great for being on the road with a mountain bike. But then Google Maps took me on a real mountain bike trail on the way coming back. It was brilliant. So I was like, oh, finally, yeah. I was gonna, wow. A lot of times, sometimes Google Maps will take me on like these dirt, like not very rideable, like if I had a road bike. But I was like, hey, all right, I'm on a mountain bike. I can get it right through this track. Actually, it was some rocky area. I was like, ooh, I better be careful here. But anyway, all right. Yeah, great to you join us, Taylor. Happy. Thanks for having this opportunity for us all to be together, the Warrens brothers and son and nephew. Thanks, Taylor.
Yeah.
Thanks, Randy.
Yeah.
Talk to you guys soon. All right. Bye now.